Now, recently I had a very exciting opportunity. I was asked to cover this event. It's called Mom's Clean Air Force, but it's not just for moms. It's not just for women. There are a lot of men involved as well. And it basically is a live event actually happening right now. And it's all about how microplastics are negatively impacting people's communities, negatively impacting your overall health and your life. And what we're going to be looking at shortly is we're going to learn how the plastic industry lies to you and to me. That's what I personally am very interested in myself.
We're going to pivot now to learn what the plastics industry, the people who are profiting from all of this, from the plastics crisis, from the plastics that are piling up in our landfills, being burned in incinerators, the threats to our communities, and the toxins in our bodies. We're going to hear about what they are proposing as a solution to this crisis. I'm Melody Reese, the Federal Policy Director here at Mom's Clean Air Force. I spent almost 10 years as a policy staffer on Capitol Hill before coming to Moms. And now I'm on the other side, visiting congressional staff as an advocate for clean air and public health. Since I started with Moms 3 years ago, we've been doing a lot of work to educate lawmakers and their staff about the dangers of plastics. And we've had some really constructive, really productive conversations. But staff aren't just hearing from moms and their allies. They're also hearing from industry lobbyists who are desperate not only to protect the status quo, but to increase plastic production. Our next panel is going to explore some of the false solutions that are currently being promoted on Capitol Hill. I'm happy to welcome Alice Park back to the stage. She's senior health correspondent for Time Magazine, and she'll be moderating this panel. She's joined
How
by
many
my
people
colleague,
want to?
Cynthia
Hey,
Palmer,
push F in the
our
chat if
plastics
you already
industry
agree that the
analyst at
plastic
Deceive,
industry's solution is going to be
Jim
complete
Professor,
nonsense.
an organizer
Let's see
with
some Fs in the
Cynthia
chat.
Clean Air, who is fighting a proposed pyrolysis incinerator in Maryland, and Lynn Anderson, an organizer with So Be Concerned Citizens, who's also been fighting pyrolysis and gasification efforts in Ohio. So let's give our panel a warm welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melody, and it's my pleasure to be here for this discussion. We just heard from a session from community leaders about the impact that plastics is having on communities and on the front line. So I think we're going to take a little bit of a different tactic, as Melody said, and explore how the plastics industry is responding to communities that are asking for accountability and asking questions. And clearly, it's not reducing the amount of plastics that they're producing. As we've heard, the estimate is that they will be tripling production, but they are proposing solutions. So
That's just absurd if you think about that. They're going to triple production after we already know the serious health problems that occur with the plastic industry.
Let's start with you and perhaps lay the groundwork a bit on understanding what these solutions are and maybe educating people about some of the buzzwords that we're hearing, advanced recycling, and what that actually means.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to start by taking a step back and looking at why the plastics industry is even proposing solutions, like what got us to this point. An analysis of World Bank data found that the fossil fuel industry has been making $2.8 billion per day, every day, for the past 50 years. And that staggering number helps explain why the fossil fuel petrochemical sector has such an outsized role in influencing governments, in quashing health and safety rules, and in halting any action to address the climate crisis.
I called it. I so called it. Remember I said, I know the plastic industry is going to offer phony solutions because they have a vested interest. This just elucidates that very fact. They have such a vested interest. They're making over $1 billion a day off the production of plastics.
Plastics are a lifeline for the oil, gas, and coal companies desperate not to let the promise of renewable energy cut into their profits. With regard to the false solutions, 70 years ago, the plastics industry came to realize that their durable plastics materials would only remain profitable if people threw them away and bought more. And indeed, close to 40% of plastics now are single-use disposables.
That's
But
just
there-
that. I mean, you don't even have to be like an environmental, junkie or whatever to recognize that that's just stupid. That's just inefficient. That's ridiculous. It's clear that the plastic industry has like a profit incentive, and now it's even causing them to make lower quality products in the process.
There is no safe and effective way to get rid of plastics. For decades, the plastics industry has been promoting the false solution of plastics recycling, which hardly works and which makes higher toxicity plastic. Another false solution is to send our plastic waste to other countries. And until 2018, China accepted 70% of US plastic waste.
What?
And then in 2018, China said no more. But we still send some of our plastic waste to Vietnam, Mexico, Malaysia, and other countries where it is buried, burned, and thrown in waste dumps. The plastic industry's latest claim is that plastics is a circular commodity which can be dealt with through advanced recycling. And I'll leave it to my colleagues here
What
to
the hell is advanced recycling?
tell us more.
Okay, before we get to that, though, let's talk about recycling. And how did the recycling red herring get to be so established? Was there data produced? Was it a failure of our, regulatory agencies in not vetting that data? How did we get into the belief that plastic could be recycled?
It was a failure by many quarters. The plastics industry in the 1980s was desperate for a solution as people started to realize plastics were washing up everywhere. And the industry started putting about $50 million per year toward advertising. The government got on board, and it was an all-government approach, all-industry approach to convince us that plastics is recyclable.
See, that's also really concerning to me that we have a US government that will bend the rules for certain corporations or even certain people if they make enough money, if they're bringing in enough profit. I made a joke the other day, but it kind of almost seems true. It's like, I guess when you reach $1 billion, the law just no longer applies to you. So this is just ridiculous. And I see people in chat also saying, why would another country openly accept our plastic? I'm going to look that up while we listen to this.
In practice, it produces high toxicity, recycling produces high toxicity plastic, and it produces a huge amount of microplastic particles, between 6 and 13%, according to a recent study.
So it says here, China previously imported significant amounts of U.S. plastic waste because it was cheaper and convenient way for the U.S. to dispose of its waste. Chinese businesses saw it as a source of raw materials, especially after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. So Chinese businesses welcomed waste plastic from overseas because it was often of higher quality than what was available domestically.
Between 6 and 13%, according to a recent study, of the plastic that goes into a plastic recycling facility comes out in the effluent as microplastic and nanoplastic particles, which get right back into our drinking water.
And Shamika, as Cynthia said, we are now moving from that recycling, red herring, to advanced recycling. You're from Columbia, Maryland. Tell
Advanced.
me about how you got involved to become an activist in this area and how you're fighting or trying to educate people about what advanced recycling is.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Thanks to Mom Clean Air Force for inviting me. As you mentioned, I have become an activist. Who knew? Sometimes you go right from the pot into the fire, and that happened in my neighborhood. About a year ago, some neighbors, a little less than a year ago, some neighbors found out that the company next door to us was going to, it requested an air permit application from the Maryland Department of the Environment to do a pilot advanced recycling plant where it was going to burn plastics. I mean, that's not what the application said as clearly, but there were enough smart people in the neighborhood to understand that that's what it was. And I'm going to do like Joe Banner did a little while ago. I'm going to backtrack and just give you a little bit of information about my community. So I grew up in New York City. I moved to California. I lived in really big cities. And when I became a mom, and after COVID, I was just over the city. And so we're like, we are going to move to the suburbs. And so we moved all the way across the country to this suburb, which is the #1 city to raise your kids, the best county in Maryland on some lists. So excited. My husband's like, I want to build a house from scratch. We found this community. We built this house from scratch. We drove up the block to see the community, and we're like, wow, we're passing this company. It's called Grace. It looks like it's a church. Whoa, we are living next door to this church. We start asking around. We find out that it's the administrative buildings of this really huge company. Nobody quite knows what the company does, but it's the administrative buildings.
It's going to be some plastic thing, yep.
So fast forward 2 years, and now our neighbors are finding out that it is a chemical company, and they usually do research and development, but right now they want to do this pilot, advanced recycling plant, and they want to burn plastics in our backyard. So about 2 weeks ago, I found out that I'm in a fence line community. I just heard that term for the first time. And that this happens pretty frequently. So we are on the front line of basically trying to help not just residents in our community, but the broader
That would be really
Columbia.
that would be really scary too to think about that. Like if you're really excited to move into a new place and then all of a sudden there's this massive company right behind you and it's engaging in potentially toxic behavior, like behavior that could literally pollute your air.
Community understand what is happening. If you read any of the documentation from the company, you would think that we are a bunch of crazy people who don't know how to read because the words that they're saying are not the words that we're reading. And so we are really having a battle of words. They're saying left, we're saying right, and it's confusing everyone. The residents are confused. It's just like in our local community who are also on the fence line, some of them are like, what are you talking about? Why are you so hyped about this? We've had to really convince like elected officials, other Howard County residents, the media sometimes, that, you know, we are not making this up. You know, a lot of people are like, we love plastics recycling. It's like, I'm glad that you love plastics recycling, but we're talking about burning plastics in our backyard. And so, yeah, we've all become activists overnight. We've all had to learn like what this means. What are VOCs? We've all heard it before, but these are terms that are now like kind of ingrained in our vocabulary. It's been a long 8 months.
Okay, we're going to come back to those 8 months,
Okay.
but I want to talk to you, Lynn, about your similar experience in your hometown of Youngstown, Ohio, and tell me about what your community is facing, similar to what Shamika was describing about trying to get on the same page with plastics industry and understand and help educate people, I guess, about what they mean when they talk about recycling plastic.
All right, we're a former steel town, and ours is a unique situation because a guy came up from Dublin, Ohio, a very rich suburb, of Columbus with this great idea to buy the old Youngstown thermal plant that is defunct. And he came in, got a Public Utilities Commission of Ohio permit to be a steam heating and cooling company because our downtown buildings are run on radiator heat. So he got that permit, but suddenly on July 21st, 2022, in front of the Public Utilities Commission of our city council, he said his business plan is to do advanced recycling and solve the plastics recycling problem in the USA. And he was never going to go out of business like Youngstown Thermal because he was going to produce more plastic, carbon black to dye your tires black, synthetic gas. And we now find out that's to sell to the Shell cracker plant just over the border in Pennsylvania in Monaca. So he even said that he was going to make some electricity and sell it to a contractor for mining of cryptocurrency. So that's when we just jumped on it. We formed Sobe Concerned Citizens, and we just started educating the public like crazy.
I kind of like hearing their individual stories and how they all sort of came to the same organization and the same conclusion.
First grant came from the Ben and Jerry Foundation, which was interesting because we had an organizer when we were doing anti-fracking from 2011 to 2019, and she said, well, you guys know what you're doing. You know, you're Mahoning, you know, frack-free Mahoning, so we're giving you money, and you can fight this. This is pyrolysis. Pyrolysis, it's not advanced recycling. And the American Chemistry Council, you know, is trying to lobby to make this classified as manufacturing. It's not incineration. It has to be, you know, deregulated from Rule 129 of the Clean Air Act. So
Let's back up and describe pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis, this guy says, oh my gosh, this produces zero pollution because it's absolutely no oxygen in there, you know.
So to distinguish it really from just burning plastic.
Yeah, he's trying to get a slap suit on us because one of our activists said that's a strategic lawsuit against public participation. One of our activists got called at home by him, and he said, you're lying, you're saying we're burning plastic, and we're superheating, you know, recycled plastic.
Did they really say that? Listen, we're not burning it, okay? We're just superheating it.
There is oxygen even in plastic, and there cannot be this process without any oxygen, and it will release dioxins, furans, and volatile organic compounds into our air. We have a steel mill producing frack pipe right below this affected neighborhood. We're declared an environmental justice community of concern because of the horrible health outcomes of our people because of the steel mills for decades and decades. But those provided jobs, and those provided, you know, our community actually was a steel town. But this does not provide jobs. They want to locate right next to this same community, this beleaguered community, and combine their pollution with Vallourec, Home Office France, steel mill, you know, so that we'll get even more poisoned.
So Shamika, you talked about the war of words, which, you know, we just heard about a little bit from Lynn as well, in terms of, you know, people really talking about the same thing and trying to argue over semantics. In your view, and in the fight that you've had, who has the responsibility for kind of setting those definitions and ensuring that people are on the same page? You know, is it state legislatures? Do we need federal definitions from the EPA, from an agency like the EPA? In your view, where should that come from?
Well, in my personal opinion, I think it should come from the company initially. You know, I understand like marketing and, you know, trying to make sure that things are clear for the end user, right? Pyrolysis is a very big term. But at the very least, you know, acknowledging that you are doing what we know you to be doing is the responsibility of the company. And I do think when we are dealing with things that seem very scientific, right? Like, we're not burning.
Superheating sounds
Right,
very
exactly.
scientific. Yeah.
It does become really hard for the layperson. And I think we do expect that, like, elected officials know everything. Well, they don't. They're not scientists. And in our case, the company was there before we were. So they had a lot more established relationships. So in my opinion, it is the company's responsibility. But when they fail, and that very often does, we usually have guardrails. We have, industry watchdogs, or we do have the state government, we have the federal government, we have local government. And there seems to be some disconnect between, there has to be some middle ground. The language that we use, maybe they don't love it. The language that they use, we don't love it. There has to be someone helping us kind of bridge that gap. And I can't say for sure who it is. I don't think it's there.
It's definitely going to be difficult. I mean, if that one company isn't even saying that they're heating it anymore, they're not even saying they're burning plastic. They're saying they're superheating it.
Yet. It seems to be a hole.
Okay, Cynthia, I wonder if you can address that as well from your perspective, as an advocacy group. Who, in your opinion, should be trying to set those definitions or establish standards so that at least everyone is on the same page, or that there's some, I don't know if requirements is the right word, but just guidelines, or as Shamika was saying, guardrails for, what everyone's talking about and what you can and cannot do, and what we know about the safety implications of, process X?
Well, there are guardrails, and there are very clear definitions, and we know that pyrolysis incineration is a form of incineration. It's written into the regulations from decades ago that pyrolysis is incineration. It's a different form of incineration in that it takes place at lower temperatures with less oxygen. But unfortunately, that means it's actually more dangerous than other incineration.
How?
Pyrolysis means burning the plastic at 400 to 800 degrees Celsius, which happens to be the ideal temperature range for generation of dioxins, which are some of the most persistent and potent carcinogens there are. With regard to the oxygen, the industry keeps saying, oh, it's low oxygen, it's no oxygen. And I say, hell, that's a problem, not something good. And municipal waste incinerators add oxygen so that they get full combustion. If you keep just a measly amount of oxygen, that's not a healthy way to go. That makes it more dangerous. Now, in terms of your question...
See, this is so disastrous. Like, the plastic industry is so money hungry that now they're even pulling this kind of nonsense. They're even trying to say, like, well, it's a little bit better, even though the process by which we're using to burn the plastic now actually releases more dangerous chemicals.
Makes it more dangerous. Now, in terms of your question, which was, what do we have standards? Do we have laws? Yes, we do. We have the Clean Air Act, Section 129, which regulates solid waste incineration. Very clear cut. The only problem is that the plastics lobby is trying everything to argue that, one, plastics trash is not actually solid waste, it's something else, and two...
So not subject to the Clean Air Act.
Yeah. Not subject to the Clean Air Act because waste is not waste, and plastics
It really is.
incineration...
That lady that said it was like a war of words, that was really well said, because it does seem to be what's happening here. Like, they're just trying to change definitions at this point.
is not real really incineration. It's this superheating that we're talking about. So we have a big battle on our hands in Congress, in EPA, and at state legislatures across the country as the plastics lobby tries to sidestep what are very clear regulations in the Clean Air Act.
So Lynn, as we see the industry do this, as Cynthia's saying, sidestepping, what are clearly regulations that are already in place, how do you educate a community about buzzwords like superheating, about pyrolysis, and so that they understand that what they're hearing from the plastics industry, as good as it sounds, advanced recycling, perhaps isn't what they think it is?
Well, in our unique situation, this guy has a thermalizer, and he said that he tested all this, and, it's perfectly zero pollution. Well, number one, he's a liar. We had to educate everybody that he's lying. He's a
Bring in
snake
the heat. Sheep.
oil salesman, and there is no testing of his process because his process doesn't exist. So we educated our community in the lies that, hey, they have the IRA money and the IIJA money, and these companies are popping up all over Ohio to get this money by greenwashing their processes, by saying, we're creating green jobs, give us the money. So that is how we educated our community, and we said, look at the Shell cracker plant over there. This guy and all these other pyrolysis plants that are trying to pop up in Ohio are saying, we're going to make synthetic gas for sale, and we're going to sell it to the Shell cracker plant to make more plastics. They're going to make nurdles. They're going to crack that ethane molecule, and they're going to make plastic nurdles to make more plastic because we need more plastic. So that's how we educated our community, and we got our zoning shored up. We got the Kramer Environmental Law Clinic at Case Western Reserve University to do a legal analysis on our mixed-use community zoning and say, hey, no industrialization in this little area of Youngstown. And we worked with our mayor, our city council, and we just kept, pounding them, and they actually founded a climate committee in the city council. And we said, hey, we got to get this stopped because this is going to explode. One of these plants exploded in Richmond, Indiana, one exploded in Ashley, Indiana, and the same plant exploded twice in Denmark. So we have a moratorium on gasification and pyrolysis in the city of Youngstown. It's going to expire December 25th of 2025, so we have to keep, pounding them, and we have to renew that moratorium.
Shamika, are you finding...
That's pretty good, though. That's really powerful that their advocacy managed to actually stop more pollution. That's really impressive.
Similar success or empathy with your local leaders? Because that seems like that's the first place to start.
So when you say success, I want to acknowledge that we have had some amazing support from our elected officials. So shout out to Deb Young, our county council member who proposed a bill on our behalf that was shot down. This is why I say success. We needed 5 votes. We got 2 yeses and 3 nos, and we were so disappointed in the nos. And part of why was because, we had our kids testifying. There were hundreds of people supporting, our bill. And the no's that we got were like, oh, you're just picking on one company. Oh, you say left, they say right. The messaging's not really clear. I'm not really sure who to believe. And so I can't say we haven't had success. We've had some really good leaders backing us.
That's so stupid for them to be like, but you're picking on just one company. What? No, let's not vote against one company polluting the air, because what about all the other companies polluting the air? Let's not start making the world better because the world is still bad. What?
Mom's Clean Air Force has, you guys are the bomb. They have really helped us out and connected us with elected officials we wouldn't have even thought to try to contact. So we are working as hard as we can to say yes to success, but we are still in the middle of the fight. So I can't say yes yet, but I'm thankful for all the elected officials who have taken our calls, who have supported bills, who have invited us to support their bills. So we're still a work in progress.
Still impressive,
And I
though.
know this is a question that's probably a sensitive one, but a lot of people probably come to you and say, why don't you just move?
Okay, every time I hear a version of this question, I actually get really teary-eyed. So I told you about my path. I've gone from New York to California to Maryland. I have 2 kids. I cannot just keep uprooting them.
You shouldn't have to move.
I shouldn't have to.
Right.
And it's not just about me. Like, one of my kids was going to speak at one of the conferences, and he said, we can move, but other people may not be able to. It's not fair.
That's true.
It's not fair to my kids, and it's not fair to other people's kids. I wish
That's true,
I
because,
had.
I mean, these plastic industries are driven by profit. And to make matters worse, they're polluting areas, and they're making so much profit, but these areas are, some people in those areas are struggling financially. They don't have the financial ability to just move. They can't just buy a new house.
Had it in me to just up and move. I don't. So yeah, so that question gets me every time.
I'm sorry for making you emotional, but I think it's very powerful.
It is.
Here. And Lynn, in your community, can you tell us what kind of response you're getting, and are people eager and open to hearing about sort of both sides of the equation, if you will, or is it hard to combat, the promotion and the quote-unquote education, I guess, for lack of a better term, or information that's coming out of the company?
Well, this company is kind of hiding from us right now, and we got rid of their $23 million bond issue from the Western Reserve Port Authority, so their investors are just, running scared, thank goodness. But the beleaguered community we have very poor people, we have people working 3 jobs to keep it together, we have people with bad health, we have people who could never afford to move. It's hard to get them off the couch because their lives are so challenging. That is the hardest part of organizing, is getting people motivated and getting them up and speaking out. I do not represent, the community demographic. We're finally hiring an organizer, a young black woman. We're very excited to bring her on before April 15th. Like I said, the moratorium has to be renewed. So yeah, it's a constant, just effort every day, day in, day out, through the media. We just put a billboard up directly across from the Title V polluter Vallourec steel mill that says, we have enough toxic air pollution, and it has our website up there really big. So we're looking forward to just tens of thousands of people going to our website now. But anyway, it's the fight. That's the fight. That's what activism is. You're fighting for your lives.
It's true. And honestly, she's also highlighting exactly what I was just saying, that there are people in her community working 3 jobs, very, very struggling significantly with finances and whatnot. People who are in that situation, they're not able to just up and move.
And Cynthia, with respect to that, I understand that Mom's Clean Air Force is going to Capitol Hill. So can you tell us about that effort and what you hope to accomplish?
Sure. Well, we have so many goals on Capitol Hill. The administration and the Congress are gutting critical air pollution rules that protect us from hazardous air pollutants, ending environmental enforcement against heavy polluters, firing scientists, terminating environmental justice, obliterating federal action on climate change, gutting the nation's chemical disaster rules that were pitifully underprotective in the first place, wiping out the national...
What is the Trump administration doing? What is Elon Musk doing? What are they doing?
Institutes for Occupational Safety and Health, which is responsible for the research that has saved the lives, lungs, and limbs of millions of workers. Just a few days ago, President Trump invited industrial polluters to send him an email if they would like to be exempted from hazardous air pollution rules more quickly than it will take the administration to dismantle the above rules. So you could just do it by email and not have to wait.
What?
It's
that is
just
pitiful.
staggering, the long list that we are asking for on Capitol Hill. Did Americans vote for all this? For toxic air and water, for chemical disasters, for climate emergencies, for a contaminated food supply? No, they voted for lesser egg prices. And this afternoon, one of our top priorities on Capitol Hill is that the Senate is about to vote on a resolution to roll back the Clean Air Act, protections against the 7 most hazardous air pollutants. The measure would enable 1,900 chemical manufacturers, refineries, and other heavy polluters to turn off their pollution controls forever. So we have a lot on our list. All I can say is we all need to raise our voices, put our
No, she's right. People did vote for lower egg prices, and now look what they're getting.
congressional leaders on auto dial, expose the liars, and litigate like hell.
All right, on that note, thank you, Cynthia, Shamika, and Lynn.
I feel like I learned a lot of interesting things here as well. All the speakers did very well at articulating their arguments and their point. They definitely knew what they were talking about. That one lady, when she got emotional, that was really moving. And honestly, we've learned a lot of the ways in which the plastic industry is in fact lying to us. And it's concerning and disturbing. This definitely changed my perspective on my day-to-day life. Yeah, I feel like that too. I feel like I'm much more aware of like what is actually plastic and how do we get rid of it? I'm gonna Google this really quickly. Is there a way to recycle plastic? Cleaning, shredding, and melting plastic waste into pellets for new products. But isn't it the melting process that pollutes the air? Yes, plastic recycling can contribute to pollution in several ways. Plastic contains various chemicals, including endocrine disruptors and microplastics. During the recycling process, these chemicals can be released into the air, water, and soil. The recycling process involves breaking down plastic into smaller pieces, which can generate microplastics. These tiny plastic particles can enter the environment and accumulate in the food chain, posing a threat to wildlife and human health. Air pollution, wastewater contamination, downcycling, limited efficiency. So, yes, there is technically a way to quote-unquote recycle plastic, but the recycling process doesn't actually do anything. The recycling process doesn't even reduce the pollution, which is what's just so upsetting.